All right. We're on lesson 24. We're continuing on the perfect indicative active. Now, what we have here is we have some irregular verbs, like English, go, went, gone. Went doesn't even sound like go. Gone's kind of goes with go, but went doesn't. So it's an irregular verb. We have irregular verbs in English, probably because English is a conglomeration of three main languages, but Greek had different city-state dialects, and so they picked up some things like that too, similar to ours. The lexicons, and I will, before we get through with this course, I'll go through and how to use a lexicon to find out the various aspects of it. We'll have this. Now, if you have my Role of Women book, I have an appendix that I deal with some aspects of how to use a lexicon. If you don't have it, I'll send it to you electronically, okay? I wrote two books, and then I put them into one book, combined them together, and I've added about 12 more chapters to it. And but one of those chapters will deal with how to use the lexicon. And so let's look here. We have the perfect indicative act, continuation of lesson 23. We have here oidomen, oti apo tu theou, eleluthos, didaskalos. We know, and this is perfect tense, that thou art a teacher come from God. And so apo is ablative case, and we know that, and so we know this thing to be a fact, that you are come from God. You have come. Now here's also perfect tense, John 3 and verse 2. Now, the Greek authorities, grammarians, I have several sources that I've given in your notes that I've sent you, and several of them say that the perfect tense is not used unless they had a definite reason for it. In other words, it's not just there just for variety, right? And so we need to go back and kind of review what it's all about. I think I went through this pretty good the last lesson. It was recorded, and but we'll open it up for questions if you got any. I think these same authorities tell us that the perfect tense is the most important tense for interpretation of the Bible, of all the tenses. It's more important than any other tense. I'm not saying we don't have importance in any of the other tenses, just saying they think this is the one that's the most significant. And whenever it's used, they claim that there was a reason to be using it. Right? So it's important that we understand what this perfect tense is all about. So let's look here. We know, and oidomen is we know, and it kind of functions almost like a present tense. Remember, your perfect tense has both past and present in it. So it's the present results of a past action that was completed. That's in simple terms. We don't have the English perfect tense does not do justice to it. It covers a little bit of it, but doesn't cover all of it. And so the perfect tense then is completed results in the past, and the results, completed action in the past, and the results of that action continue with us today. Okay? And so the actions are with us, the results are with us, the consequences of it are with us. Okay? And so it could be, the type of action could be durative or linear. It could be like punctiliar. And so you gotta be careful with it as well. It's so let's look here. We went through this last time. I think we went through all of this, but I'll show you where this is in the file that I've sent you. We have irregular or kappa perfects. They have a kappa in them, and you'll see the kappa down here. The kappa is here and here. Okay. Now here's two words: gnosko and horao. Notice the rough breathing. These two words are pretty common in the New Testament, and both of them have perfects that are kappas, kappa perfects. They have a kappa in them right here, kappa. And a few verbs having the kappa sign have perfect stems which differ from the present stem. So the stem changes when they change tense in this case. And so that's an irregular verb like go and gone in English. Now, in chapter or lesson 29, we will look at those principal parts, which will be looking at the verbs that have this in them. What I've tried to do in this file that I've given to you, this lexicon and grammar notes file, I've tried to mark all of the ones that have this form that they change. And so they're in that file, they're marked. I believe I've got them all marked. I think I do. I went through it twice to make sure I had them all marked. So I'm pretty sure they're all taken care of in there. So lesson 29, we'll go through these. We'll be looking at them in that lesson. That's just 5 lessons away. Fine. Okay, you have to learn them from the lexicon itself. And later we'll show how to use the lexicon to get into this, okay? To pick this up. The second perfect, we have first perfect and second perfect, like we have first aorist and second aorist. Remember, in the first and second aorist, the only difference was in the form. The meaning didn't have any difference. So your first and second aorist tenses had the same meaning. So there was no change in the meaning from the first to the second aorist. It's just the form of it was different. It's the only thing. Same thing happened with our perfect tenses. The first and second perfects, they have the same meaning. That is, the tenses do. The tense does. There's no difference in the meaning. Of course, there would be a difference in the meaning of the words, but there would be no difference in the tenses of those words, of those verbs, okay? And they differ from first perfects only in having the kappa, okay? They usually exhibit a mute stem in a rough or aspirated form. Pi or beta becomes a phi. Pi or beta becomes a phi. And so you put a kappa with it, and that's what happens. And so a kappa and a gamma becomes a chi. So it becomes a chi. And a tau and a delta becomes a theta. This is what happens on those forms. Either strong or weak verbs may take the second perfect form. Okay. Right. You learn the principal parts. This will be lesson 29 of the verb erkomai. This is found quite a lot. This verb is. Let me see. I think footnote 9. Erkomai is found 632 times in the New Testament. So it might be kind of nice to know it. Okay. I put that footnote in there myself. Just kind of help. Icon. Look at your principal parts of it. This is present tense. And of course, there's your augment. So this will be aorist. And there's your imperfect. And there's your perfect. They look at all the different forms it has, like go and gone in English. And it's all from erkomai. It's the same word. Conjugation of the perfect Here's your perfect, there's your perfect. I'm going to conjugate it now, show how it's conjugated, Ericomide. And it's, again, it's found like 600 times or more. So it's kind of important. You're going to run into most of these forms somewhere. If you translate in the New Testament, you'll run into most of them on the Ericomide, because it's there so much. And so right here now, what we have here is we have a reduplication. Remember, it reduplicates, so it's because it's repeating itself. So here is lu, there's your stem for luo. And when they augment it, what they do is they'll augment it and have a connecting vowel, and so we lay lu, I have come. And so this is the form of it. And again, you have lu, and then this becomes a thos. So the endings are tha, thos, they, and then a reduplication. And so we have that. And notice here, we have a thaman, thate, thosi. And that's your three endings here, thaman, thate, and thosi. And then your basic form there. Everything before these is the same. Notice there. Everything before. All of that before is the same. Right. So we got the last two letters, last three, last two. Thaman, thate, thosi. And then it's going to be the same. Everything everywhere else is going to be the same. Okay.
So question, if you don't mind.
All right, yes. We have a tha, thos, they, thaman, thate, thosi. Go ahead.
So it's a theta in this example because Ericomai has the key, or why is it not a kappa?
Okay, I think the stem changes here. Ericomai, key. It's a theta. A tau delta becomes a theta. Oh boy, he got me on that one. Sorry.
Oh, that's fine. So the root of Ericomai is Erica. So because it's a key, it becomes theta then? Is that, I guess, how that's working?
I think there's the root, what's highlighted in red right there. Let's go over to the lexicon and see. I think I've got it in the lexicon. All right. I know you're not seeing the lexicon right now. I'm gonna go and I'll change it over and let you see it if it's in there. Okay. It's got two roots. All right. I'm going to bring them, I'm going to copy them and put them back on this other file for you to see, okay?
Okay.
Come back over here. Can you still see Robert's grammar?
Yes, sir.
Right. Here's what come off the file that I sent you. There are your roots. And this is right here. This is per Erkelmeyer. But the root changes. It tells us here somewhere the roots change. Somewhere in this file, he tells us the roots change when you go irregular. So the root becomes epsilon lambda theta. That's the root of it. So that's where the theta comes from. The root changes. Okay.
Thank you.
Epsilon lambda theta. Right. So that's where that comes from. Right. Okay. These picked up from different dialects is what happened. So they're just a piece of one other dialect. And I'm not that good in the older Greek. I haven't studied it at all. All right. The classical. Okay. And your infinitive, of course, you have an infinitive for it. Remember, the imperfect doesn't have an infinitive because it would do the same thing as a present infinitive. It'd have the same effect, so they don't have one. So your aorist has an infinitive, your present has an infinitive, your perfect has an infinitive here. And so again, we'll have this same basic form then I. And so that would be, from there to the end would be your ending of your infinitive. Now, any questions? Okay, there's no difference in the meaning between the first and the second perfect. Remember that. And their present results of past action. There's just two ways of forming the same tense. That's what they are. Now, let's conjugate oida. It's found quite a lot as well. And it's the second perfect of the verb ido. Now, the ido is found 318 times. That's quite a, oida is found 318 times. Not quite as many as Erkelmeyer, but 318 is still quite a few times. Right? The ido form is obsolete. It wasn't used in the New Testament times. It's remnant of older Greek, but that's where it came from. Right? So, right here, oida, learn the conjugation of oida, oidas, oide. And oida, by the nature of it, oida is a perfect tense form. Okay? So it's perfect tense. And so when it says oida, I know, it means I knew in the past and I still know. Basically, that's what it's saying. I knew and I still know. I have present knowledge of past information. Right? And I know, you know, he knows. Oida, oidas, oide. And oidamen, oidate, and oidasi. And so your amen looks a whole lot like omen. Ate looks a lot like ete. Ase looks a whole lot like usi. So it's still kind of similar to present tense, the forms, at least in the plural there. The stem for oida is id. There's your stem, those two letters in the middle. Notice you still have ID, delta, and all of them over here, that same stem. The accent mark does change due to some rules, but they still have the omicron iota. That's your stem. The classical Greek is idman. And, so that's what it was. And of course, oidamen and idman. And now, let's see here. Our vocabulary, we only have just a bunch of perfect tense verbs primarily. akekoa, akekoa, and that's from akuo. And that means, of course, I hear, and that means I have heard, and I still have the results of what I heard. Probably would be like remembering something, still having that information in my brain. Right? I have heard, and I still remember it. It's have the information's there, still have it. And on aoga, and on oigo, I have opened. That's perfect of that form. I have opened and it's still open. Say, open and it's still open. I think that word is used in the book of Revelation, but I can't remember for sure. And I should have looked that up and made sure of it before today. And, but anyhow, oops, I don't want to do that. All right, gagona. From ginomai to become, I become ginomai. Gagona is I have become and I still am. So Paul could say I have become a Christian and I still am. See, we could say the same thing. And from grapho, and so we get grapho. So your reduplication, your gamma epsilon, and then probably your stem is graph. Okay. And comma, rho, alpha, probably phi. Okay, that's probably your stem. Right over here, it probably doesn't change stem. So we drop the omega and we have the stem, and I think this will be your stem. The gamma epsilon is reduplication. That's a mark of a perfect tense. Okay. Right. Our perfect tense is what we would call present perfect. There is a past perfect tense. We call it pluperfect. Okay, we'll come to that later, and it's kind of real helpful. It's not very often found in the New Testament, but it's really helpful. I think it's really important in interpreting the 7th chapter of Romans. We'll get to that a little bit later, a lesson or two away from us right now. Okay, as grapho is to write. I have written, and it's still there. The perfect tense, when it says it is written, when they quote the New Testament, it's almost always perfect tense. What that means is, in fact, I'm not sure. I might be wrong. It might be always perfect tense. I said almost. I left the possibility open. I might be wrong, but my memory says virtually every time, if not every time it's found out it is written, it's really perfect tense. It has been written and it's still there. The results are there. In other words, it's written in the Old Testament scriptures, and it was true then, it's still true now. It's still there for us to contemplate and study and learn from. And that's pretty significant to tell us that all scripture is profitable, because it has been written as perfect tense. Any comments there? Okay. Lambano, and lambano is different than decomai. Make it, okay, kind of messes it up. And that'll go. I don't have an accent mark on it. There's your word. It means to take or receive also. And lambano means to take or receive. And the difference in them is lambano is a self-prompted taking or receiving, and decomai is to welcome, receive something was welcome. So it's just little subtle differences there. And so right here we have the decomai. But let's go back. We're not looking at decomai here. We're looking at lambano. Okay. Let me get out of this. I want to do that. There we are. Get everything back like it was. Lambano, the lexicons will define it as to take or receive. The word take is a gloss, Gloss, gloss. It's a word that kind of replaces it. And receive is a gloss. And so taking and receiving are two different things when you think about it. Taking is more of an active voice. Receiving is kind of like passive voice. And so both glosses fit, and you have to determine which one goes where. And I'm convinced in my study of it, and I'm no great scholar, but my conviction is that whenever lambano is in the active voice, it should be almost always, if not always, translated take. And lambano, when it's in the passive voice, should be translated almost always, if not always, as receive. Any question? Now the middle voice would go along probably more with the active voice, probably more of a taking. Now, if that's true, there's a passage in John 14 where it says, "Whom the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive," but it's in the active voice in the original. I think the translators missed it. I think it's whom the world cannot take. They're going to take me, Jesus, your first comforter, and they're going to crucify me, but they can't do that to the second comforter, the Holy Spirit. Okay. I think that they weren't able to take him by force like they did me. And Jesus, of course, let them do it for our salvation. But that's my translation of it, my interpretation of that passage in John 14. The world cannot receive. It should be take. The world would be the ones that were going to crucify Jesus. Okay. Any questions? Now notice your stem changes here in lambano. It's irregular. And when we get to lesson 29, we'll see that irregularity. Now in the file that you have, lexicon and grammar notes file, if you go to lambano, it will tell you it's irregular. It's irregular, and I'll tell you what tenses it's irregular in. Okay? And then we'll show you a little bit later how you can look it up in the lexicons and see it there. Right. So hopefully you have a lexicon. I think a good one is Thayer's. I think Thayer's good. I know it's an old lexicon, but I still think it's real good. And of course, if you want to buy the latest and greatest, you pay a couple $100. That'll be Danker, Bag, Bauer, and Gingrich Danker, Badag, they call it. And if you want to really outlay some money, I'm not sure it's that big of an improvement on Thayer. Okay, but I have about 5 or 6 different lexicons, and I don't find very much extra in the Bauer Danker and Danker and so forth. Badag, B-D-A-G, Bauer Danker. No, I'm sorry. Bauer, Arden, Gingrich, and Danker. Bag. Okay. Bag, B-A-G-D is how they have it. Okay. And Ericomine, we've already looked at it. It's got a different form. It's irregular. And then from Horao, doesn't even look the same. Horao and then Oraka. That definitely changes form, and your stem is going to change in the perfect tense. So it's one of those irregular verbs. If you go to lesson 29, you can see that. If you want to cheat and go over and look at it, you can see some of the irregular forms of them. You'll see them. We haven't covered everything that you need to get all of those forms, but we're just about, like I say, about 5 lessons away from it. So we're not very far away from it. Oida and I have seen id, and then posco, I suffer. And of course, this is the suffering. It's the word that's used by Jesus for his suffering. And here's a perfect tense. And so it kind of looks different. It's got a different form. Patho is I am persuaded, and poitha, and again it changes too a little bit. There's your reduplication, pi epsilon, and so it's poitha. It's poith. Probably pi omicron iota theta probably is your stem. I'm suspecting. But right, your stem in the present tense would be everything before the theta, before the omega. I'm sorry, where I got my cursor. Okay. All right. So I am confident now. The word believe actually is derived from this word. And pistuo and pistis, both those words come from this. And pistos, faithful, an adjective. And to kano, I happen to succeed. And it's tetuga, tetuga. And so that perfect form has a different form. But you still see the tug. And what happens, and I think your stem probably gets cut off about right here in those endings, and that's in your perfect. We'd have to go look at it and see what its stem was, but I think that would probably go right there. Okay, Inosko, I have known, egnoka. And so we have that's perfect form. And again, I think these are all over there in that lesson 29. I think all of these are there. Krodzo, I cry out, and ke krodza, kraka, ke kraga. And so again, there's your reduplication, kappa epsilon, and then the rest of it probably will be your stem. Probably kappa, rho, alpha, maybe gamma will be your stem, those four letters. Probably your stem there. And we can figure that out from go to Krodzo in the Steyer's lexicon. He'll tell you what it is. Okay? And again, I'll show you later. Any questions about this?
On that, it says I have seen, and it says no there. I have no, that should be known. I have known, like down here, Genosko.
Well, I have seen, I know. So he says it means I know.
Okay.
And so I've seen it and I still have this knowledge of it.
Yeah, okay.
It's kind of like seeing with the eye of the mind. Anyway, I remember when I taught some college students, we get the real hard concept to learn, and someone would say, "Oh, I see," and just like in the eureka moment, I found it. And you'd hear someone say something, and that happened once in a while. I see that, and you see a big smile on their face. It finally got through. So, but anyhow, that's I know now. I know it now. I know what that's all about. So, any other questions? All right. You probably didn't get through text day. All right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to skip over to the next lesson and kind of go introduction to it, and then we'll go into, all right. Then we got the pluperfect tense. I want to talk about it just a little bit. The pluperfect is made from the perfect stem. It's the fourth principal part. So that you'll get into that a little bit later, the fourth principal part. All right. Opu, upo, elelutha, hey, hora, ought to, his hour had not come. Right? So this is the past present tense, perfect tense, past perfect. Now, it's similar to the English past perfect, although it has some other subtleties that the English past perfect doesn't have. So we think of it as the closest thing we can get in English is past perfect tense. And it still doesn't cover all the bases. So it's made up from the present stem. If the perfect has a comma sign, the pluperfect will have it too. So it'll follow right through with it. But second perfects will have second pluperfects. Right? The connecting vowel and the second, first, and second pluperfects still have the same meaning. It's just a form. The connecting vowel is epsilon iota. So your connecting vowel is your epsilon iota. And the endings are the secondary endings, okay? In addition to the reduplication that we have in the perfect, the pluperfect has an augment. Now, if we go back to our perfect, it doesn't have an augment, but the pluperfect does. Why? Because it's past tense. So you'll have, like here, your perfect will look like this right here, which is in red or pink. And then it'll have that augment that goes with it over here. That'll right there would be like your perfect. And then the augment will go with it. So that's luo. And of course your stem is lu, lambda epsilon right in the middle where my cursor is. There's your stem right in there. And lambda epsilon is your reduplication. And that would fit in with either the perfect or the pluperfect. The difference between them would be your pluperfect would have this augment out in front of it with the parentheses epsilon, and usually an epsilon, and that will be your augment. Does that make sense? Any question? All right. And then you have the various endings here. Now let's look what the footnotes are. There are no New Testament examples of these persons and numbers. So we don't have, the pluperfect is not very common. So you don't find these two in the New Testament. Right? The other ones, the other three, these two, and this one are not in the New Testament. We have a third person singular, second and third person plural are in the New Testament, pluperfect forms. Okay. So they're not very common, but again, there is a verb in Romans 7 that's real critical, I believe, to interpretation of Romans 7. And there's one verb that's pluperfect. Now, if you don't have my notes on it, you'll let me know and I'll send them to you electronically on Romans. Okay. Any questions? All right. So we'll come back to the pluperfect now. We'll do that next week. We'll get into that next week a little bit more. I'm going to go back to the lesson back here. What I want you to do for next week is I'd like for you to translate text A and take a stab at text B. We can do that too. Right? Now, I'm going to get out and get into a little bit of another file. Okay. All right, stop sharing. Share again. Can you see the file?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Does it have reads and rushes on the top?
Right.
What does it have? Page 127?
I can't see the page number. Yeah, 127.
Okay. All right. I'm going to scan down. Perfect tense.
You don't work on that.
I think we went through this last week or the last class. Did we go through this? If we didn't, I need to go through it.
Let's see. Somewhere I think that.
I think so, but it wouldn't hurt to revisit.
Well, let's just revisit it. It's page 364 in this file. Now the file keeps growing because I keep adding stuff to it. So I'll send the file to you tonight. You'll have the latest and greatest, okay?
We did this one in lesson 22. That's when we went to that.
So let's go back because this is so important, I think. We need to cover it again. We've only got about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
The perfect tense stands alone in its function. He tells us English has no corresponding tense adequate for expressing the significance involved. So what has to happen there is whenever you're teaching on it, you have to make a commentary on it. You have to comment and explain it. So it has to be done. Now, the problem is you have some people that are not willing to listen. They don't want you to be using Greek, and I understand that. And it can be kind of scary. They're out of control of the situation because they want to look at it in English. The English, a lot of times, what you can illustrate it with is show what the English would have to say. And this is the Greek tense completed action. So it's something that happened in the past. It's a state of being, completed action with a resulting state of being. So something in the past happened and was completed, and we have a state of beings, and there's something continuing with it. For instance, you could say, I was in an accident and had my right arm broken, and I still have trouble with my right arm because the break was so bad that it injured the arm permanently, so as my arm's not functioning right. So that would be a situation like that. Or one could say, I was baptized, I have been baptized, and I still have the effects of that baptism. I'm a Christian, a member of the church. And again, as I pointed out earlier, you could use the idea, it is written, that's almost always perfect tense. I think it is always, but I'm not certain. I won't launch out that far. I haven't checked them all. But the perfect tense and would say it is written, it was written in the past and was completed. The writing was completed, and it's the effects of that writing are still with us. The Old Testament Bible scriptures were written in the past. It was written. It has been written, and so that's a perfect tense, and that fits quite well with this. And so if you're going to use this to teach, it might be good to illustrate it with some things that everyone would understand and agree with before you use it on something that there might be some disagreement. All right?
So, question.
Yes, go ahead.
So in the case of it is written, what would be the result today? That it is still written?
The effects of it being written are still with us. We still have the scriptures, and we still have the truths that are in the scriptures.
Okay.
It's a man could be in an accident. I knew a man that he lost an arm, and he was like nearly 100 years old when I was just a kid, and he lost an arm at Bull Run in the Civil War. And so he just had one arm. So he had his arm shot and they amputated it. I think they just sawed it off with a saw without any anesthesia. That would be, it'd take a real man to handle that. But I think that's what happened to him. And he still had the effects of having that arm amputated, didn't he? And so he could use the perfect tense there. He lost his arm and it's still gone. Or I became a Christian, I'm still a Christian, see. All right, does that make sense? That help? Still have the results of it. The scriptures are written and we still have the results of what they teach and all the results that come from what's in the scriptures. I think that's significant. So right here, there's three things, three ideas. And the three ideas is that there's an action in progress. It comes to a point of culmination, and it exists now as with completed result. The man that I knew, I was just a little boy, about 5 or 6 years old when he died. He was over 100 years old, but he got an arm shot and he lost one of his arms at Bull Run. Okay, I think it was Bull Run. That's what they said. And he was a Confederate soldier, okay? But he lost one of his arms, okay? Yeah, any questions there? So there was an action in the past and it came to a culmination. His arm got shot and cut off, and now it's still cut off. That probably would fit that pretty good. Perfect answer. It complies and implies a process, but looks at the process of having reached consummation, exists in a completed state. Okay. That's pretty good. And you can get this, and this is on page 364 now. You can study these on your own, but read them again. But right here, it's the tense of complete action. Its basal significance of progress of an act or state of point of culmination existence of its finished results. I like these because they use different words to say the same thing. Maybe that helps us to see it. In the indicative mood, the perfect signifies action is complete from the point of view of the present time. So it's complete action. What that's saying when it says it has been written, the scriptures that the Old Testament scriptures were complete. And so it's telling us also that they were finished. And now we have them. They were written in the past. They were finished being written, and we don't have them being written anymore, the Old Testament scriptures. That's another implication of that. Burton tells us it's an action that's standing at the time of speaking complete. The reference to the tense is double applies past action from its existing result. Burton is pretty easy to read. He's kind of short. He's very concise in what he writes. One of the first books I bought, I found it very useful. It's a very useful book. But he doesn't get overly wordy. He's pretty concise in his stuff. But still, you can get the meat out of it. Vaughn and Gideon, it's an intermediate grammar book. It's pretty good. It has examples from, basically examples from the books of First Peter, I believe. I think it has a lot of stuff in it. It goes through the book of First Peter, if my memory's right, and maybe James. And it deals with them in some detail in translation. We're pretty close to the end, but I would encourage you to look this over. And it has perfective, stated, resulted, completed action. And so it's got several different aspects. And there's several pages here talking about it. And this would be good to kind of at least look them over. And then, of course, we got the pluperfect tense down here on the next page, down here on page 366, which we'll be getting into probably the week after next, okay? We'll get into our translation next week. Do you have any questions? All right.